Names are the individuals and organizations that you do business with. In this session, we're going to talk about the details stored in the General tab, Addresses tab, Credit Cards tab, and Custom Name fields. To select a name, go to Setup, Names. We're going to edit a name. Highlight the name and click Edit or double-click. In the General tab are stored different details of general information. The name format has a choice of business or individual. If the name format is business, you'll have one field that identifies the company name, and it formats the federal tax ID number to a federal employer identification number format. If you select individual, you'll have a last name, first name, and middle initial, and the federal tax ID will be formatted for a Social Security number. In the name type, there are four options: customer, vendor, employee, and salesperson. Names that are selected as customer will show up in receipts transactions and any receivable transactions. A vendor will show up in payments and any accounts payable transactions. Employee will be used in CenterPoint payroll and are showing up in the setup employees list. Or if you're using basic payroll, CenterPoint accounting for agriculture, employees used there also. Salespersons are names that you can select as a salesperson for customer invoices in accounts receivable. In the name format for the customer and the vendor, there is an extra detail button. For the customer, for names that are customers, you can click Detail and select the payment term that you want for this particular name and the default accounts receivable account that you'd like to use. For vendors, you can click the Detail button and again select the payment term for the vendor and the default accounts payable account. And also there is a checkbox for on payment hold. If that box is checked, then you will not be able to make any payments, or they will not show up in pay invoices due until this on payment hold is unchecked. As we go, you can have as many different types. One name can be several different types. So they could be customer, vendor, employee, salespersons, all of the different types, or just one. And again, it's managing what screens you would see these particular names on. In the name information, you can have an abbreviation. If you want to make sure that you don't use any duplicate abbreviations and names, you can right-click in this field in the abbreviation and select an option to allow duplicates, warn of duplicate, or no duplicates allowed. And that will just kind of manage so that you don't have more than one name with the same abbreviation. Abbreviations are a shortcut in looking up names or entering a name in a field that is looking for a name. And then you'll put in your different information for the name of the company or the individual, a contact person if that applies, and their address information. In the address information, you can have it formatted as city, state, zip, city, province, address 3, just a free format, or a foreign address information. If your preference is set to allow entering a zip code to fill in the city and the state, then entering a different zip code will bring up the cities that have that particular zip code, and you'd be able to select from there, or if there's only one that it finds, it would fill it in. On the right are other pieces of information for contact information, phone, fax, email, and up at the top on the name information is a group. If you are wanting to organize your names by a name group and you've identified a list of name groups, then you can select that particular group for this name, and that would be used for reporting purposes. Down at the bottom are tax information. The federal EIN number or Social Security number, a state tax ID, and if you are needing, if this is a vendor and you need to do a 1099 federal form for this particular name, then you would want to check this box. And the names that are marked as issued 1099 would be displayed when you're working with reporting the 1099 forms. The memo field is a handy place to store an account number you might have for this particular name. And when doing checks or printing invoices, it would be printed on the memo line 2 so that you don't always have to remember what that account number is and put that in each time. It would automatically fill out that line and be printed on your check or invoice. Down in the bottom is a print notes form. If you have stored notes on your name that you want included on forms like a purchase order form or a check, you can, there is a field in your forms designer called payee notes that would put this field on the form, and if there are notes there and this is checked for this name, it would print those notes on the purchase order or the check. And over at the right is an active status. Any of your names can be active for one or all companies or inactive for all of them. If I click deactivate all, it would deactivate this name from all of my companies, and that name would no longer show up when I was doing a new entry, although I'd always be able to get to it in reports for past activity. And it can be active for one company and not the other, whatever the case is. And then there's an options button to set tab stops if you want to set different tab stops on your field as you're working through these different fields on the tab. If we go over to the addresses tab, you can store as many different addresses for each name as needed, and each address will have a location type, which are defined under name location types, and you can have as many different combinations. These just organize a different type of names, but you do not need to have a separate location type for every address that you're storing. You can have as many as you want going to the same type of address type, like we have a couple shipping addresses here. And then again, over on the address information, you could have a name on that address so you can identify which type of address this is that you're working with, the contact name if that's applicable, the address information, and if this checkbox is checked for print contact on forms, then it would print the name in the contact name rather than the name on the general tab here coming from the company name or the last name on the form that you were printing. And if you want this particular address active, you could inactivate this address if you wanted to. And use this address as a default. Each address can have a default, but there can only be one default for each of these different types here. So only one address can be a billing, one can be a business, one can be shipping, and one can be pay to. You might have one address that is all of them, but if we were to go, right now the shipping address is marked as shipping, but if we wanted to say, well, I want to make the alternate shipping now the default, if I switch that to shipping, it will come up and tell me that it's already defined as the default in the shipping address. Do we want to change this, and do you want to continue? And if you say yes, now it becomes the shipping address no longer is the default. It still is available, but it won't come up as the default for the shipping address. And then each address is also maintaining the other communication methods information for that particular address, so each one can be different. And then if we go to the credit cards tab, you can, if you are storing the credit card information on file for your names, this would be the list of different credit cards that you're storing. Each credit card will be coming from a credit card type that you've identified in the credit card types. And then you would again give it a name so that you can identify one from the other and the information for that credit card. One of the credit cards can be marked as used as default credit card. If you had a couple of them here, only one would have this checkbox, And again, there's an additional notes if you need to keep notes for the credit card information. And we have the buttons down at the bottom on each one of the tabs. On any items that are there, you're going to be able to click new to make a new one, use the copy to make a new one from selecting one and copying it, or delete one of the items on the list. And then we'll go to custom name fields. Custom name fields are different pieces of information that you want to store in names that CenterPoint doesn't already have a field for. In here, we've made some custom name fields for sales goal date and website login information. You can create new pieces of custom fields by clicking the custom field button at the bottom and click new, and we can make a new option there for custom fields if we wanted. And all of the custom fields will show up on each one of your names, and then wherever you want that information to be stored, you can go ahead and add that information. So on this particular name, we have added the website login information because this name has a website, and in case we forget the login, we've stored that. And those are some different things that we can do from our names and different details that can be stored on each one of your names.